Perfect. All right. Welcome. Welcome. We have Miss Angela today with us, and we are chatting about all things sexy.
Yes.
So Angela, give a little context for the listeners, kind of like your journey from because you're a boudoir photographer, you're also a disability activist. I'm not sure if that's a phrase that you use to call yourself, but also you're a sexologist and yoga instructor.
Hmm.
Correct.
That's right.
So multi-talented in multiple things, which is fantastic. So yeah, so talk, kind of share what your journey has been. Like what started the catalyst of all of the things.
Yeah, it's funny because if you would have told me I would have been doing this work 10 years ago, I would have thought that was nuts. Just it wasn't on my radar. But I feel like everything I experienced kind of led me to this point and this journey. So I'd been a photographer for pretty much since the 90s. I started in film and um, I really had a passion for photojournalism, and that's what led me to study cultural anthropology. And my line of thinking was like, oh, this will be perfect, and then I can go out and be a photojournalist. Well, right around that time is when newspapers were downsizing and no one was hiring. So I was like, okay, shit, that's not going to work. So what do? We adopt. So along the way, I started my own photography company, and I was just doing a little bit of everything, like weddings, pets, like throw me anything and everything. Um, and then I started photographing boudoir here and there, and I realized that that and editorial kind of fashion inspired work was kind of a passion of mine. And so I really decided to focus there. Um, the more that I did boudoir work specifically, I saw the link between like body image and boudoir work. And I became really fascinated with that aspect, and also, how our own culture plays a role in these ideas that we have about body image. Um, and so I really just started kind of toying with these ideas, and some of my experiences with clients really inspired me to dig deeper and to want to learn more. um, I guess partly I think it's interesting because I think that in some points what we do and what we're passionate about ends up stemming from healing our own trauma,
You
perhaps.
usually, I think, is the actual thing. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like in my experience, it's like, oh, it's so much easier to just help other people. So
Yeah. And
than worry about my own shit. We're like, why does this resonate so much with me?
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so, and I think growing up, I had my own body image issues, especially, being a teen in the 90s when it was like that heroin chic look was in. And so I developed my own body image issues. And so I, in a way, saw it, I was healing others. And in that process, I was healing myself. Um, and then in 2016, as you know, I had a stroke, completely changed my life. Before that, I didn't have any known medical conditions. So I went from, I thought, being healthy to being very sick, and almost died in 2016. The stroke left me completely blind in one eye. Luckily, I am left eye dominant, and I went blind in my right eye. So, the universe looks out for us.
Someone's got positivity over here. It could always have been worse.
It could have been way worse. Exactly. No, so I was really lucky in a lot of ways. But that experience really changed my relationship with my body because it began, I already knew this, but it really hit home that it's not about what it looks like, it's how it's letting me live,
Mm.
how it's letting me experience this world and what I'm doing. And so at that time, there was old other things happening in my life. At the time of the stroke, I was pregnant, I miscarried, got told I can't have kids. So it was a lot of uprooting and changing of the expectations I had for my life. And I turned to yoga. I had always been a yoga practitioner, but it was more a form of exercise and like movement of my body, joyful movement of my body. But all of a sudden, it went deeper. It went
Mm.
more to like the philosophy, the psychology of it. And it really helped me to heal because, as you know, when I had my stroke, I had two hospitals miss it. So, we can go down the road of talking about how our medical system fails people, but we won't right now.
That's
That's
for a
another
whole
topic.
other podcast.
Yes,
Yeah.
that can be another podcast. But uh, I had a lot of resentment and a lot of anger that I had to process, and yoga helped me to do that.
Mm.
And so, going through that experience, I realized like I wanted to help other people who had chronic illnesses and disabilities, especially those who didn't think yoga was accessible to them, whether
Mm.
it be the way their body is shaped or what it's capable of. And so, I went and I got my 200 hour, then my 300 hour. I was trained in adaptive and therapeutic techniques. And so my passion, before COVID, is I was going out and like working with stroke survivors, and I was going to support groups, and I was showing them yoga and meditation techniques, because I think we have these ideas, especially with like Instagram, of like what a yoga teacher looks like or is.
Yeah.
And I kind of break all those molds, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of like that. And I remember when I was teaching before COVID locally in San Antonio, before my surgery, I was on oxygen 24/7, and I would show up to my yoga class to teach with my oxygen tank, and there was always like people would be shocked, and I'd see their confusion, and I didn't let it bother me, because in my mind I was like, if these people are coming to like really learn, I've got some shit to teach them. Because if there's
Yeah.
anyone who understands the power of breath, I promise you, I understand the power of breath. Nothing like living with a lung disease to make you appreciate breath and understand the importance of breath work. So yeah, I love working with that segment of the population. And then the sexology aspect came into it, because as boudoir photographers, people open up a lot. There's something about them getting half naked in front of you physically that makes them uh, be vulnerable emotionally.
Hmm.
And so I found that people were opening up about their sexual experiences, sexual trauma, experiences in their current relationship. And I kind of didn't know how to handle it at the time. And so I took the approach of just holding space. Like, this was me just holding space for them to process. Um, but along the way, I wanted to learn more, and me, I'm always trying to learn and gather more info.
Yeah.
And when I had my illness and I was in the hospital for months, and I knew I was going to have more procedures and more surgeries, I realized photography wasn't something that I could sustainably do if my health took downhill turns, or had, it's going to have dips and lows, and
Yeah.
there's no cure for the disease that caused all this. So I have to adapt.
Yeah.
And so I took the opportunity to study sexology, and I took about 2 years, and I went and earned my certification with the American College of Sexologists. My specialty in that is in the intersectionality of body image, sex. Um, I'm also really into like the mindfulness aspect of sex. And then I have a particular passion of helping people with chronic illnesses and disabilities, because I think we have all these ideas of what we think is sexy, and it's kind of like, I want to show people like, it's sexy is a state of mind, it's an emotional, it's not like what we look like, it's not that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sorry, long-winded
That's
story.
but I think it's always important for people to like kind of hear how you get to where you are. Like I think that's really important to, especially because I think a lot of people that listen to my podcast anyways are standardly photographers, that they think like, now I'm a photographer, this is where I stay. You and I both know that that's not at all. And then if you expect that from yourself, it can be very stressful, because then all of a sudden you're like, I want to be over there, but I'm also afraid to leave, because this is what boudoir photography is supposed to be. Meanwhile, we want to expand it to include yoga, or in my
Yeah.
case, like workshops about body image or whatever the thing is. But like, so I always like for other photographers or other creatives to hear that your mission can be executed through more than just with your camera.
Yeah.
And your scenario is a perfect reason why I think it's important to think like that, because you never know what's going to happen, that one day you may not be able to take photos, or you may not be able to do that, but that doesn't mean your life's calling or your mission or your purpose ends.
No.
And there are multiple ways for us to execute those things, but if we're like really stuck on the label of being a photographer as the only thing, then you're going to feel really stuck. And you very much, after you went through that experience with yourself, you very much, well, I'm sure there was depressive points
Of course.
along the way. You very easily could have stayed there being like, well, what does, nothing matters now. But instead you did choose to adapt and say, okay, I know this work is still really important, and if not even more important for this very select group of people that definitely don't have somebody advocating. And it allowed you to kind of give you a purpose again to
Yeah.
like step up for people just like you did as a photographer. So
Well, and I think you're absolutely right in that I feel like my purpose is the same. I'm doing the same work. I'm just doing it in a different way.
yeah,
And that's what I tell people is I'm still doing the exact same work. I'm still empowering people. I'm still encouraging them to like live their life and that they're worth so much more. I'm just doing it in different ways through the body image coaching or the yoga or the sex coaching. And I I miss the photography aspect right now. And I'm not doing it because of COVID.
yeah,
But what I thought was interesting is you said like as photographers we think like that's what we have to do, that's what we have to be. And I know I was at a point of how am I going to transition, and then
yeah,
COVID happened and it kind of forced it
yeah.
because it was like it cut off my photography arm completely, like in
Yeah,
that.
that's what I say. Like, it, well, mine's not like because I don't have a chronic illness, so like I
Right.
was able to work a little bit, but it literally
It
like
forced
was like,
me.
okay, like shit or get off the pot now. You have nobody to blame but yourself. Like at this point, like
Yes.
you've been thinking about it, so now's the time to act. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. COVID
um,
really was that like slap in the face for the world, I think, of like,
what do
you
you
know,
want?
you need more time? Here you go.
Well, and I think it just opened up. But again, like you and I both have that positivity aspect where we're like, okay, yeah, it does suck. There are parts of
Right.
this that really suck, and it's hard and stuff like that. But there are also ways that we can innovate, we can
Mhm.
adapt,
Yeah.
and we're not going to let it keep us down and feel sad about it. Does that make sense? So,
Absolutely.
I think that you and I both are kind of that same way where it's like, oh, I'm mad, but then you're like, okay, well, I'll stay here for like a day, I guess.
Yeah.
But then after that, it's like, okay, what are you doing about it?
I think I stayed
Fix
there
it.
for a little longer than a day in 2020, but
Well, rightly so, though. You also are in the US, so you
I
had a
I
lot of
had a
other
very
things
stress
to contend with besides just
I
the
had a
pandemic.
very stressful year. Yes. I'm in a
Yeah.
much better place than I was a few months
Yeah,
ago.
I remember when we talked a few months ago, you were very fiery at the time about the way people were behaving.
Yes.
And then we talked about how you can't control how people behave. So what can you do is control yourself,
Yeah.
which has
And
been
I
good.
know this, I do. I know this, but yeah, we all need those reminders to stay on that path.
Oh,
So
same.
thank you
Me
for
too.
being that sanity for me.
Oh, I that's okay. I also had to do it to myself and have my mom do it to me. So you're fine. So what is a mantra? Like you have been through a lot of shit. Like you have gone through a lot. What is like kind of a mantra or phrase that kind of helped that you hang on to get you up in the morning to like when you had like after you had your stroke and literally almost died, like
Yeah.
what was the thing that said, yeah, this sucks, but like what was the thing that you said to yourself to
I mean, I
focus
don't know
on?
if it was like a mantra per se, which I do love mantras. But for me, I found focusing on gratitude.
Okay.
And I I have this little technique. I don't know if I've shared it with you before. So whenever I see like all the numbers match on a clock, like 2:22 or 11:11, I pause and I do a gratitude check of
Oh, my mom does
everything.
that.
Who does it?
My mom.
Your mom? Yeah. So I do like a gratitude check and I like go through and think of everything I'm thankful for. And I always tell people like it's really important that we're in a state of gratitude even when shit is bad. And to me, it's especially when shit is bad, it's important
Yeah.
that we hang on to something. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be like, I'm thankful for the way the light is coming in and hitting that leaf on the tree and it looks like it's glowing. And like that's a beautiful moment that I'm grateful I'm witnessing. I mean, it can be, even if we're in a state of pain or a state of physical discomfort, emotional discomfort, grounding to gratitude is just such a powerful thing to me that brings us back to this moment, to our body, all that.
When you were at one of the lowest points after your first, like after you came out of the hospital, or maybe when you were in the hospital,
Mhm.
when you were like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
Probably, I would assume that's at first.
Yeah.
But like when you realized the severity of everything that was going on, what what was the gratitude that you found in that moment to hold on to, like, so you didn't, because the thing is, when people are sick anyways, the if you have a negative mindset, your illness will exacerbate. Whereas if you can focus on positive thinking, and not toxic positive thinking, but just
No.
like thinking, like practicing gratitude or things like that, your chances of your resiliency is much higher, like
Oh, yeah.
physically. So what was like at one of the lowest of the lows for you? What what was the gratitude that you remember
Um,
clearly?
and this kind of does go into like the work I believe I'm here to do, but it's community and connection is really what got me through it because after my stroke, the community pulled together in so many ways to help me. And I'm talking about like my local community, my clients, also the boudoir community, the Association of International Boudoir Photographers pulled together and did a fundraiser for me to help me to kind of give me a cushion to recover. All these people came together and some I never met, and they were giving me um, either their expertise or their time. I mean, people were just giving me in so many ways. Like, people were offering to, like, I'll edit if you need me to edit. If you have weddings booked and you need me to do them, I mean, people were just coming forward. And that was like such a huge thing to be grateful for that I had this support group. And yeah, that was just like
That's
the
beautiful. That literally is, I'm like tearing up over here, just so you know. I'm like, it's fine, suck it back, Terry, it'll be okay.
No, but yeah, the community really, I mean, and that's what I'm here for. And, I talking to Jill about like my purpose and stuff, I feel like um I'm here for a purpose, I feel like. And I my purpose isn't like to have a family and I'm not going to have children and I'm not going to do certain things that maybe I thought I was going to do, and that's okay. But I do feel like my purpose is to serve like the greater community and to like, I don't know, like just be this like spark of hopefully inspiration that other people can find joy in their life, even if it's hard. Because and that's the thing, I've realized that some of the people that are the most joyful in life have been through the most shit because they've had to face that.
Well, and that's something I was actually I was talking to Jill. So for those of you that are maybe just checking in, Jill is my associate, my like one of my best friends, and she does coaching as well. And so her and Angela have been working together throughout the last few months here. But when Jill and I went for a walk the other day, socially distanced, don't worry, people. But we I actually brought that up because I was saying about all the stuff I've been sharing on my Instagram lately has been super personal stories about growing up. And it's always about, I found out who I was by finding out who I wasn't. And that usually comes from some sort of traumatic thing that you're like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I don't like my mindset that I have, or I don't like the person I've become, or I don't like what's happening to me. So I need to get myself out of it, kind of thing. And I was saying, as a somebody that was bullied from a young age, like I had to learn early on, it's like it could always, like it can always be worse.
Yeah.
And I know that's like something that can be used in a way that's like toxic positivity or whatever. But literally, when COVID hit and I was going down the spiral of anxiety, of uncertainty, and like, what the hell? Like, my business, like, what am I doing? Should I get rid of the studio? Like, all of these thoughts. And all of a sudden, it was like my brain was like, you watched your father die. This is not more difficult than that was.
Yeah.
And what did you do to get through that? Because you did get through it. And so it was like, okay, well, I took it one day at a time. So it's like having those really difficult scenarios to get through
Hmm.
makes things more like opportunities. And like, say, what can I learn from this? Because I learned from this really hard thing, and like I lived through that and lived to tell the tale.
Yeah.
And it was hard and it was dark, and I almost didn't make it, but I did. And if I can do that, then this thing is like
Yeah.
like this is nothing, you know? And so I think it gives us kind of that anchor to like always weigh things against, if that makes sense, to
Yeah.
realize that, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. Like,
Well, I think you touched on something that I think positive people do. And again, you talked about like that toxic positivity, which I'm not like for that at all. Like the whole
yeah.
like, oh, good vibes only. I'm all fuck that. Like there's all kinds of vibes. And we're gonna deal with them. Um,
Yeah.
but the idea that there is a learning to be had through an experience, even if it's hard. I
Yeah.
think that's something that people who are positive do. Is
Yeah, I think it's I can't remember who said it, but it's like not what's happening to me, but what's happening for me.
yeah, yeah.
That kind of idea, like shifting it from, oh, the world is out to get me, or it's like, or what is the world giving you?
What is the world giving me, right? And it's funny because I would tell people my stroke was a gift, and people would look at me like I was crazy and nuts, and I'm like, no pun intended, but seriously, it was a gift of perspective. It literally changed my perspective.
Yeah.
Literally.
Literally now just one eye.
Yeah. But no, it shifted my perspective. And I was like, some people live their whole life not getting it. And some people don't get it until they're like 60 or 70.
Mm,
So what a gift to have that perspective in my 30s.
yeah.
And that's how I saw it. And I decided to like learn from it. And that's resiliency. And we've I've had conversations, especially with Jill, about like resiliency and where does it come from. And it's interesting, because I also think there's like something that happens with anxiety. Anyways, it's a I'm sure you would be fascinated because it's all like psychology stuff. But uh, yeah. Anyways.
But yeah, well, I think it's just like one of those things where, again, it's like nobody can pull you out of that except for yourself. Like nobody, because like, yeah, it's nice when people support you. Obviously, that's great, and that helps to be like, okay, there's got to be something bigger happening here that I don't know about. But ultimately, it's got to come from like some deep.
Yeah.
I think Angela Duckworth calls it grit, some grit to get you out of it. And like you can't, and I think that's what makes us stronger, so that way when it does. And the other thing is, we all have a baseline of happiness, like from the time that we're born. And so if we are in situations where we don't have everything, our baseline is going to be a lot more like it's easier to make us happy.
Yeah.
Right, because it's like we again are comparing it to our baseline. Whereas people that have high expectations because they maybe have gotten everything in their life, then their expectations are high, that, well, they are not resilient because they never had to be.
Yeah.
Right, so it's kind of
And
fascinating to like, yeah, I don't know, but again, you and I are both very positive
yeah.
people, so that is kind of how our brains are wired, to look for what can we learn here
What
today, and
can we
how
learn?
can we
Yeah.
use this to help other people. That's like both of us, I think, in
But
that way.
you hit something so important to me, and that's that, um, we we take this experience and we really do like twist it on its head, right? And it's like, what caused that resilience? I'm like, what caused that resilience for you? Do you know?
I think, well, I've always been self-aware, which was helpful. Like
Yeah.
I journaled from the time I was like, I used to write stories to help me process my emotions, like by the time I could write, essentially, and read books and stuff like that. So knowing now what I know, how journaling helps, I
Yeah.
could see how that would have helped me develop self-awareness. As a kid, I was essentially having conversations with myself through writing, from a young age. But I was also very blessed to have a mother who also, taught me how to critically think. So she herself is very much like, well, you have two choices. Like you always have a choice. Not choosing is a choice.
Yes.
So like, and so like that was like hammered into me from the time I was really little, is like, it happened. Like you can't change the reality of the situation. All you can control and change is the way you react to it.
Yeah.
And you can, you, and that was her thing. She's like, you can be this way if you want to. That is your choice to be that way. But does that help you become the person you want to be?
Yeah.
Or you could also do this thing over here. And is that more in line with the person that you want to become? And so from a young age, that's always kind of been in my brain. So sometimes I took the other path. but
Yeah.
but then after some time realized that, okay, maybe she was
Okay.
right. Fine.
Yeah.
you know but you find your way back, and that's what my whole like Instagram series is like, finding out who I was by finding out who I wasn't, is that whole process
Yeah.
of listening to my inner voice, I think.
Right.
And so, but I think it's that idea of, you always have a choice.
Yeah.
You may not like your choices, but you do have a choice, and it is, nobody can do that for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it
And
wasn't
I
like
think,
one specific scenario, it was just like kind of
yeah.
all throughout. It was like all throughout my childhood, for sure. My mom I would say my mom doesn't have really high empathy. So like for her, this was her way. She wouldn't be like, there, oh, come here. Well, she would still hug, but then
Yeah.
she'd be like, okay, but like,
Let's
let's
take it out.
strategize and figure this shit out, like, here are your choices, very business minded that way. But I'm grateful because I
Yeah.
know I've known how to critically think since I was little, which is good. Then I make my own decisions, whether or not they are good or bad.
Yeah. I think you and I share that in our childhood, kind of.
Yeah.
Something else you talked about was like the expectations, and I
uh,
think that that's really important because I think expectations can set us up for like disappointment.
oh,
And
absolutely. There's a quote
I,
by John Maxwell, is my favorite. It
what is it?
says, when expectation oh, disappointment is the gap between expectation and reality.
I have heard that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is like my favorite quote, and this is why I'm so big on setting expectations with clients, or just managing my own. Like when I get disappointed with something, I'm like, oh, and then I was like, it is that because you expected something different?
Yeah. Well, and I even think this way, like when I shoot, like as a photographer, because there's some photographers can go into a photo shoot, have an idea of what they want, and create that exactly.
Yeah,
And bravo, I'm like, y'all are amazing. I can't do that. So I always, like when I'd go to a photo shoot, I would say, okay, let go of whatever I thought I was going to create. And that's what
perfect.
I love about your universe decides cards, is it's kind of that mentality,
Yeah,
like letting go of any expectation,
yeah,
and instead, what's there? What is
yes.
the light doing?
And
What
it's
is
a perfect act of gratitude,
it is?
because you have to find the beauty in what you have been given in that
Yeah, it
moment.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like,
I
and
haven't gotten a set of cards yet, but I'm like dying. It's on my list. I
let
actually,
me send you, I'll send you a set. I'll send
last
you a
night I
set.
bought your book, by the way, because I was like, I need this.
Oh, thanks. But yeah, I'll send you a deck of cards. I'll have to order them from the site, so we'll deal with that later. But interestingly enough, because I'm in isolation right now, I haven't been able to shoot. So my whole self portrait series,
Oh,
like I
yeah.
have this beautiful 2-room studio with like beautiful sets and da 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 da, and I can't go use it. So I've been creating in like, I told my husband, I'm like, what is this, like a 7 by 7 square that I get to work in now? And like, and it has been some of my best work
Yeah.
of myself that I've ever created, because I have nothing to rely on except for my creativity and how to make it look different for 30 days, or
Yeah.
how many days are in December? 30, 31, whatever.
31.
um yeah, and so like I have to, like, in this very tiny space with a very tiny window, because it's in the basement, so it's not even a full window, it's like one of those tiny little rectangle windows and there's a sticker in it, so I don't even get the full window. So it's like, okay, so how can I utilize what I have? And so I've been more creative, and I feel the same way doing that work that I do when I was
Yeah.
doing the universe decides in the summertime. It's because it's like, let's just see where this takes us. And like, you have to remove any expectations of what it is going to be, which can be hard. But you and I, again, both share that we are both adaptable and are like, I don't know, let's just see what
Yeah.
happens.
Let's go with the
I know
flow.
some people are like, no, I need very specific guidelines.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not like that. I never have been. I'm like,
No.
let's just,
I'm like, give
I
me
don't know what's
guidelines,
gonna
but I'm gonna fuck them up. Like, I'm like, but what if we didn't do it that way?
let me
That's how I interpret
were
directions.
you a Bob Ross fan?
No, we didn't
No.
really have that here, I don't think,
Okay.
in Canada. But like now I know he's like super
Yeah.
popular. Like
But yeah,
Happy
it
Little
was always
Trees.
kind of like happy little trees.
Oh yeah,
Like
happy accidents. Or
yeah,
yeah, is that
happy
what he goes? Happy
accident.
little
Yeah,
accidents.
happy
Yeah.
accidents. It's like, oh, happy accident. Like it's
Yeah.
that's my whole life is one big.
Yeah, and I think that's like a great mantra to have though. Is like, oh, it was meant to be that way. Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm always like, you know what? I guess this is just what was supposed to happen. And I
Yeah.
started to realize that I actually started to implement that kind of thinking even when I'm, because driving, some depending on the music I'm listening to, I can get very ragey or I will be calm. So I had to stop listening to Ludacris because like while it like hyped me up, it hyped me up and I'd be like, move, bitch, get out the way. Which does not make for a safe driver. So and also stressed out. So I was like, okay. So anytime like there'd be a train, now when I see a train, it's like, oh, but then trains remind me of my husband. So because he loves trains and he gets excited when there's a train. So now I'm like, but I'm also like, oh, Ryan, or when I'm at a stoplight, I'm like, oh, but do I celebrate the green ones when I get them? So now I'm like, if I'm going to complain about the stoplight, then I have to, every time I get a green light, I have to be like,
Gratitude.
yes. Yeah, like it's the only way. It's only fair. So that way it evens the playing field. So it's like kind of shifting little
It's
behaviors
one of
like
those
that.
wins because our brain is, and you talk about this so much, Terry. Our brain is wired to look for danger,
Yeah, always.
and it's wired to like see the bad because the bad is danger, and so we're just wired to see that. And so if you can retrain your brain to start to see the positive and the good, you can actually change like the brain, the body, and the chemicals and
Yeah,
everything.
but it's a practice, and that's the
It
hard part.
is.
Have you read I about a month ago I read Matthew McConaughey's new book. It's like Green Lights.
Yeah, I'm listening to it on Audible right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's like about that same concept where
yeah,
it's like maybe your red light stopped you from getting into an accident. So when it becomes green, it actually saved you. And so, like, all
right,
these things that never happened were blessings
right.
that became green lights. So saying, and then at the end, he talks about how COVID will see it as a green light eventually. It may not feel like that right now for everyone, but eventually it will
Oh,
feel.
yeah, and
But there's a lot of people, like, I don't know, the people I surround myself with are very positive people though, and they're
yeah.
like, "This was the best thing that happened to me."
I mean, I think, early on, I was talking about it very early on. But even like in March and April in the beginning when it was, we're still so much unknown, I kind of saw it as, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's awful in that it's causing so much heartache in so many different ways. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I'm like, this is the cultural shift that kind of our species
Yeah,
needed to like
to feel.
rattle. Like, because big cultural shifts don't happen on their own usually. There's some kind of catalyst that is going to inspire it. And when I see how it's changed, like, it's changing the way businesses operate, it's changing how we work, It's changing what we focus on, what we value.
Mm.
We're valuing connection more. We're valuing community. We're starting to appreciate the people who actually work at the bottom, like, the grocery store workers and
Yeah.
sanitation. And so, yeah, I feel like it had to happen. Like,
Well, and
it's
that's the thing, is like, as much as humans think that we are invincible, it's like nature will always win.
oh
Right?
yeah,
So it's kind of like we knew this was going to happen eventually, this kind of thing coming. And so I think it was probably part of the governmental, I don't know, ignorance maybe. I would say that, like, oh, we'll be fine.
no,
It'll, like, well, we're humans, like, look at all the progress we've made, like, we'll be fine. Yeah, that's probably what they said 100 years ago when
yeah,
something else happened. So it's like, no, nature always wins, like, she never stops. There's a really good video on YouTube that I like to watch that's narrated by, like, Julia Roberts, I think. It's beautiful, but it's about how nature will always overtake. Like, as much as we think that we're like, oh no, like, let's cut down all the trees and collect all the
no, yeah.
water and all this
Well, if
stuff,
you
like,
think about
nature's like, nah, girl, we
the
got this.
virus is nature, and like, we were spreading, like, humans were destroying the earth,
Yeah,
so the earth is
purging us.
the earth is healing itself.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's when you look at everything, it's like the whole interconnected, the world, the universe. It's just everything gets much bigger, and then all our problems seem much smaller.
Yeah, exactly. So before we wrap up here, so you are teaching a sexuality and boudoir as part of the Boudoir University course coming up on
Yeah,
Saturday. This will be aired after it has already launched, which is awesome. So hopefully people have already watched your
awesome.
segment, but for those who haven't, so yeah, so tell me a little bit about how, like, how you see in the photography industry right now that like the like sexuality and stuff like that is being performative almost in the boudoir industry in a way that is not maybe good, that is actually harmful to either people that are sexual or people that aren't sexual.
Yeah. So, my biggest thing is, I think, putting stereotypes on what we think is sexy,
Mm,
because I think that sexuality, if anything I've learned is, studying this and doing sex coaching, is that humans were so diverse in our sexuality, in what we like, and how we want to, portray ourselves. And so when we start putting our own ideas and views of, like, this is sexy,
mm,
then, again, we tend to do it from a very, like, cisgender, heteronormative, like, you know what I mean? We tend
yeah.
to put these ideas, and, what is sexy? Oh, it's a thin woman with big breasts and a big butt, but somehow has a really tiny waist. And she's in lingerie and thigh highs, and, that's media's version of it, versus, like, how do you feel sexy?
Yeah.
And that's a big difference. And that gives that person agency
Mm.
over how they choose to portray themselves.
Yeah, and I think it can help our clients redefine. Like,
Mhm.
I so many clients when I'm like, when we're talking about, like, here's what you like to wear or whatever. Like, what do you
Yeah,
want? When I usually ask them, like, what do you want to wear for your photo shoot? And then they'll tell me, and I'll be like, okay, but I just want to make sure, like, if that's what you actually feel confident in, totally cool. Cause they always say Victoria's Secret, brown panty, whatever. And I'm like, okay, but, like, just so you know, there are other things that you could do. You could, if you feel sexy walking around in the morning wearing just like a baggy sweater that and like
yeah,
granny panties, cool, let's do it. If you feel sexy wearing nothing around your house, do it. Like, let's do
yeah,
that. And nothing but socks, let's do that. Like,
yeah.
whatever. And they're the surprise of, they're like, wow, I never really thought
It's
that.
true.
And I
Yeah,
was like, that's because representation in our brains is
right,
so hammered home, like,
right.
sexy is. And who is behind all of the marketing for what sexy is men usually, so it's
Patriarch
always from the male gaze and
capitalism.
what they would prefer.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's patriarchal capitalism, who's going to portray a certain idea as sexy. And I think when you give people the power to define their own sexy, I think that there's so much liberation in that for them.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's the big thing, is just having boudoir photographers like be aware, and that we're making sure that we're not putting our own ideals of what sexy is onto someone else, or just how they want to be seen, or what gender, or, and putting, like, you never know. Like, and I see a lot of shaming around. It's interesting because when you look at boudoir and sexuality, obviously there's a link. But yeah, I see some boudoir photographers who aren't comfortable with sexuality. And
Hmm.
I'm like, how can you do this work if you're not truly comfortable with what it's underlying,
So it's
And
well, I was gonna say it's actually interesting because I identify as asexual, which means I don't really care about
yeah,
sex. I know what it is, but like I don't, and I do it sometimes, but like I just
yeah,
don't care. I have other things to do.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
way
yeah,
I explain it. So but I can see how even still, like me, like I will still photograph women in the commercialized way that
yeah,
sex is sold, as a as opposed to, I'm like, "Do you even want this? Like,
yeah,
do you even like, does that
like,
feel good to you?" Like, because like, when that was the thing, I had to have my own photo shoot, and I've had a few where I was posed sexually, and I was like, "I have no connection to these images," because at that time, I didn't realize I was asexual,
yeah,
because we're also taught that that's not a thing, but yeah,
yeah.
it is. You
So
can
these
just
are our
not want
choices.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's, like, so many different things you can be. So,
yeah,
I was like, "No, I will just accept that label for right now." And so then it made sense why those particular photos, and I was like, holy shit, how many clients have I been trying to, maybe if they see themselves this way, then their sex drive will go up. Not intentionally, but I think that's like when women come to us, well, standardly women, men too, but when women come to us, they're like, this will be the thing that finally fixes me and makes me
right,
feel sexy and worthy of sex. Meanwhile, they might be asexual and just not
right.
want it at
Well,
all.
yeah,
Like, there's
and
nothing wrong with them, but would be contributing
right,
to this idea that, oh yeah, 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 come on in, we'll make you feel sexy, and then yet there's still a disconnect, so they still feel broken.
yeah,
That's not me helping them feel empowered.
right,
And that was like really when I had to, because I had to go through your course to do the thing. I was like, oh fuck.
yeah. I mean, and I do. I think we have to be careful because, like, sex isn't like you said. Sex isn't on everyone has a spectrum of, like,
Hmm.
where how they feel about their sexuality. Some have high sex drive, some have lower, and you know what, there's no normal. So
Yeah.
it's all good. um I identify as demisexual, which is on the asexuality scale, which always kind of baffled me because I am actually very sexual, but it's not like with just anyone. I have to
Mm,
have that
a
emotional.
really strong
I have to
connection.
have a really strong emotional connection. So, like, I was never the one night stand person.
Mm,
That just wasn't me. But yeah, I think we are kind of putting this idea out there of, like, oh, boudoir is, it's going to make you feel sexy. And for some people it
mhm.
can empower them. And I talked about that in the presentation too, about it can also be about taking back ownership of your body, your agency, or I get to decide how
I'm seen.
I'm seen. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of power in that. But I think just giving people like that agency to decide how they're going to show themselves and what is sexy to them, because what is sexy to me is not probably what is sexy to most people. Like, I remember I was photographed. I've been photographed many a times. Some of my favorite photos are by you.
I like it.
But I remember I was getting photographed by Jennifer Rosenbaum, and I had been photographed a bunch that year. And she was like, "Well, how do you want to be photographed?" And I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "Well, what do you want me to wear?" She's like, "Well, what makes you feel sexy?" I was like, "A black t-shirt and combat boots." Like, that's it. Like, I was like, panties and a black t-shirt and combat boots. She's like, cool, that's how we're gonna photograph you. And those were some of my most favorite photos because they felt authentic to me.
That's
Like,
amazing.
do I look really sexy? I don't know, but I felt it.
And
And
that and that I think is the part too that we've gotten so far removed from, that we're trying to create, we're trying, the way I say is we're trying to create something instead of capture something now. Like
yeah,
people are trying so hard to create what they think they need to be, as opposed to letting us, and us letting ourselves just capture what already is.
yeah.
And I
This goes
think,
back to going with the flow.
yeah, and I think that comes from existing in Facebook groups and seeing what everyone else is doing, and
Yeah,
so you see what gets the likes and what doesn't get likes, and all of that kind of shit that falls into the comparison thing that we don't even like know, like unless you critically think about, okay, why am I doing this? You will just do the things and contribute to these harmful ideals and things like
yeah.
that. So yeah, so I'm super excited. Y'all, hers is the last course on the thing, so you got to get through all the other stuff to get to Angela's, to get the stuff about sex. That's why we put it at the end, because we're like, oh, people would want to jump there
Because
first,
sex
I'm sure.
sells.
Yeah, exactly. So I need them to get through the harder stuff first.
It's something I do want to add to the kind of like what you were saying
Yeah.
about is when it comes to like I guess that doing harm and the shame is the other problem I have is this automatic idea of like if a man calls like we automatically assume. And
Mhm.
I mean I've had those men, so I understand and everyone should honor what they want, but I also think that like there was a situation where someone posted and they're like, I freaked out and I just hung up on him. And I'm like, that's not really the way to handle it because that can be shaming for that person. And as a
Yeah.
sex coach, I work a lot with people who feel shame around what they
Want.
want or like. And those little things, whether we realize it or not, are like shaming. And
Hmm.
so, it's not saying you have to photograph a male nude, but like don't hang up on him. Like,
Yeah, still respond in a professional way. I always say set the
yeah,
expectation of what your boundaries are, but also
right,
educate on why the expectation is what it is. Because if you just say no, then they're going to tell themselves a story, which is
right,
probably already kind of
right.
fueled with some sort of shame.
Well, and you honestly don't know what that man wants.
Hmm.
Like I shared the story about how I had a guy who called and he kept getting hung up on, and he was like, he wanted nude photos of him and his wife because they're swingers.
Hmm.
Like, and they were totally normal and totally cool. And so just those expectations. Or I had another man who, he actually wanted to come up and he wanted to dress in all women's clothes. And he felt like so judged, and that experience with him of him appreciating that I gave him that space
Hmm.
to do something that was he was called to do without that judgment. Like I just think we need to be a little less judging and
And assuming, I think
and
that's the thing.
assuming. Yeah,
And like there are ways, like you still, if that's not something you want to do, okay, that's fine. You may want to question why.
right,
um but I also think there's a way to professionally respond. You may not like the consequence of how you respond, as we've seen with people that are like, we don't serve gay people or
right,
whatever. Like, yeah, be prepared that your response might show up on the internet. But if you truly want to be an inclusive photographer, or somebody that promotes body positivity, or somebody that's using these phrases about diversity and inclusivity, and then you're acting in this way, like, it's no wonder you all got imposter syndrome. That's what I, because everyone's not following what those things actually stand for.
yeah,
And so I think like there's a way to do it. Like if you don't want to do it, that's fine, but you have to be very aware of how to say it in a way that is about you, not about them. So it's
right,
not shaming them, it's just saying, this is like, I don't shoot couples anymore just because I've tried it and it just doesn't, it's not my thing. I'm
right,
not
right.
great at it, and I feel nervous, and I'm not into sex. So it's like,
Yeah,
this
It's
is awkward for me. Like it's like when I used to shoot weddings, like, was I good at it? Yeah. Could I do it? Yeah. Was I passionate about it? No. Those people deserve somebody that's
yeah,
passionate about shooting that stuff. So it's not that you can't say no, but
right.
follow up with, you know what, it's not my thing, but I can refer you to somebody that really is great at it.
Yeah,
And you can reach out to them and they may be able to
exactly.
do a webcam session if they're from somewhere else or
Yeah.
whatever. Like you can redirect it. It just,
Yeah,
so you can
and
still keep your boundaries.
that's what I really wanted to express in the presentation is I see a lot of shaming and I want to move away from that
Yeah.
where it's okay that we have our boundaries, but we don't have to have our boundaries in a way that shames people. It's
Right.
like that don't yuck my yum, right?
Yep.
Like, you don't have to like it, but
Yeah.
someone does.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Awesome. So to finish up here, I'm going to ask you two questions. So number one, what inspires you right now?
um Honestly, like I'm inspired by learning. Like the more I learn, the more I want to learn. Right now, I'm really interested in the vagus nerve, and
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm doing a lot of research and reading about that. So yeah, I'm just really inspired by knowledge.
Yep, I know this to be true. I know, you know what I want you to be inspired by?
What?
Getting your website done.
It has been so long. It's actually I told myself that it had to happen in 2020. Uh,
Well,
so
you've got 1 week.
I know I do. I have 1 week.
Angela, I've built 3 websites in the last month. Come
The
on.
problem is I hate talking about myself.
What?
It's weird because I have no problem talking like this, but like on a website, like I don't know.
Let me
I,
help you with that. Okay. Next question.
I'm actually I'm going to be contacting you to book you for a coaching session in January.
Oh, okay. Well, then during that, we're going to get your website done. That's all we're going to do on that call, by the way. Anyways, next. All right. Tell me about a client who changed your life and shifted your worldview, like basically shifted your idea maybe of sexy or what,
Yeah.
shifted the way you do your business, whatever.
Um I'm still going to go back to that one client I talk about in that. Is it okay if it's in the presentation?
Yeah, go for it.
So she shifted it in that I didn't realize she had all these insecurities and how much they were impacting her intimacy and her relationships. And when she shared her story and she started getting really emotional seeing her photos, I realized that she was seeing herself as beautiful and scarred at the same time.
Mm,
And that's something that you talk a lot about too is like you're not this or that. Both can exist,
yeah,
like and so she could be scarred and sexy, and those scars didn't make her unsexy. It was just like a part of her, and her breaking down crying was that realization that she had spent the last 10 years denying herself true connection, true intimacy with partners, um, that trust with a partner, the connection of sex. She denied herself of all that because she felt unworthy. And so when she was able to marry this idea of, I'm beautiful and I have scars, I was like, that, I just changed her world. Like, and I mean, I wasn't like, oh, I'm amazing. I changed her world. But like, her expressing to me how it changed her world.
hmm,
And that's when I just like, this is more than photos. Like what we do, taking photos is a medium that we use to do something else, I think.
yeah,
And the power in what we do lies in that like ritual of transformation that I talk about.
yeah.
So and she just was kind of like that first one that really inspired me to look at it on a much deeper level.
That's amazing. Well, is there any last thing that you would like to share with people before we exit this call?
I would just love it if people would find me on Instagram. That's kind of the best place to find me.
Until
Um,
she gets her website up.
yeah, and so that's what I was
In
gonna
2021, you'll be able to find her website.
in 2020. Right now, I'm telling people don't go to my website. No, I bought like 10 million domain names, so I need to. I know you can kind
Implement
of
them.
relate to this one. I
Yeah.
bought so I need to kind of like officially make it official. So I remember I was going by the Sex Maven,
Yeah.
but now with I feel like a lot of the sites are blocking things that have
Mm.
sex in it. So I also bought the Love Maven. So
Oh, okay.
I think I might use the Love Maven, but I also bought the Self Love Maven. So
There you go. We'll figure it out.
I have some options. But for right now, Instagram, either the photography portion is Raven Red Photo. And if you want to find my personal one, which is more of like sex coaching, yoga, it's just everything. And that's Angela.Ravenred.
Perfect. And we'll have all that information on the YouTube thing. It'll be in the description. And then as well on the podcast, I'll put it in the show notes so you can find her through there. Well, thank you, Miss Angela, for joining us. And yeah, check her out on the Boudoir University. Bye.